Chris Bassitt had a rough first start yesterday for the Blue Jays, but John Schneider spoke out and he said it's not quite time to sound the alarm just yet. So we'll have that on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's been tearing the cover off the ball in the first 18 innings of the season, and he's been making some really good decisions in the batter's box. So we'll have that and much more coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And the Jays' 4-10 first pitch today against the Tampa Bay Rays. They split the first two games. They won 8-2 in the first. We were planning the World Series parade, and then they lost 8-2 yesterday. So quite the turn of events. Chris Bassitt had a rough first start. Obviously, he wasn't great, didn't have his best stuff, but he left one pitch over the middle of the plate to Brandon Lau, and that was curtains for the Blue Jays yesterday. They just didn't have it, and that's going to happen on some nights over the course of a 162-game season. But John Schneider had some things to say about Bassitt and his start, and it was quite interesting. So, Nick, let's get into it, but are you ready to sound the alarm on Chris Bassitt? Because I'm not. We made that same mistake last year. We saw his first two starts. They were pretty rough, and we thought, oh, wow, this is going to be a tough contract. The Jays are never going to live this one down, and then he ended up throwing 200 innings, and he was probably the most consistent starting pitcher for the Jays last year. So got to give him some time. He's just getting into the swing of things here, but a rough one yesterday for him, and John Schneider doesn't seem to be worried.
Yeah, same thing happened last year, and ultimately he was fine. A quick reminder, hit the subscribe button before getting into it. You guys have been crushing it with the support. But yeah, Schneider speaks out on Bassitt, and there's some other comments as well from some other teammates as well as Chris Bassitt himself, who basically said that, like you said earlier, he left one right over the plate. If he doesn't make that bad pitch, things are very different. Here's what John Schneider had to say. He said he's one of the very few guys, and this is unique, who's thinking along with what a hitting coach is probably telling their hitters. He's trying to do the opposite. He's trying to do it in games too. And he's basically just discussed how he has zero issues, zero worries, Peter, about Chris Bassitt. I mean, we saw it last year. He had a horrible start. Worse than this one. I think double the runs he gave up, and ultimately he ended up being fine. The defense behind Chris Bassitt was really, really bad yesterday. There was 2 errors from Bo. There were some Vlad plays that should have been made, just some basic plays in general. And everyone's kind of just pumping him up and saying that Chris Bassitt will be okay, touching on his pitches and things like that. But in general, he basically just said that he's fine, he's totally in control, and that even though he had a poor start, he's good to go.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you throw 8 pitches and, you're kind of ramping up as spring goes along. But in the Gate 14 interview that he did with Johnny Junta and Avery Chenier, he basically said that I'm coming into spring not trying to throw 95 or not trying to max out right away. I'm easing my way into the season, because he spoke about his year with the Mets and how he came in a little bit too hot and he was trying to do a little bit too much there. And it cost him. It cost him towards the end of the season. His production started to tail off, and he just wasn't the same pitcher that he was earlier in the year. So he took it slower this spring. He wanted to measure things a little bit more and kind of conserve his energy, because he knows that he's going to be a horse for this Blue Jays team, and he knows that he's going to have to throw a lot of innings for them over the course of the season. So I'm not worried. And again, he's trying to work on some things early on in the season. You're going to have some pitches that you leave over the middle of the plate, and again, he's one of the more consistent pitchers in baseball. So I'm not worried about Chris Bassitt. I think he's going to have a really good season. Just sucks that couldn't keep the momentum going for the Jays yesterday.
Yeah, and you look at the box score. He went 5 innings, gave up 4 runs. He struck out the first 4 out of the 6 batters or something like that he faced. And shout out to Wes Parsons for even though he gave up a bunch of runs, he saved the bullpen a little bit for today, and it just really wasn't the Blue Jays' day. The offense wasn't phenomenal. They only put up 2 runs. Vladdy was great, and the defense, I mean, with Chris Bassitt, you need to have stellar defense, and we've been talking about it all spring, all year, and how important defense is going to be. And then they went out yesterday and did about as worse of a job as they possibly could have, which is okay. It's one of the earliest games in the season. It's still very early, and it'll work itself out, I'm sure, going forward. But ultimately, for Bo Bichette, rough day for him. But I think it'll be fine. Chris Bassitt will be good. He bounced back last year very heavily, and I think he is just going to be very okay. He's a veteran, and it's not like this is Alek Manoah or someone who went out there and had a poor start after already being down bad. He'll be fine.
Yeah, and the defense didn't do him any favors, like you touched on earlier there. These two games have been just opposite ends of the spectrum. The first game, we saw great swing decisions, we saw power, we saw the guys were taking their walks, and some great defensive plays as well, apart from George Springer in that first game. But then yesterday, we saw Bo Bichette having a rough day at shortstop. We saw Vladdy overthrowing Chris Bassitt on a get over play. It was just tough. It was tough all around, and the offense didn't do Bassitt any favors either. So again, I'm not worried about this. I think he'll be totally fine. But again, it just sucks that they couldn't keep the momentum going because they were so great in the first day, and that's going to be the biggest thing with this Blue Jay team. It's the consistency across the board. Are they going to be able to bring it on most nights defensively, base running wise, and offensively? Because we know the pitching for the most part is going to do its job. They have some veterans in that starting rotation. They have some of the best starting pitchers in the American League. So I think they'll be able to hold it down, but will the other components of the team be able to bring it on a nightly basis? That's the big question mark going forward.
Yeah, and yeah, let us know what your thoughts are on that. And obviously, a player who is doing very well is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And Peter, I think if Vladdy can continue to do what he's been doing, he will be unlocked into the sense of that he can get back to the self that he was in 2021. And quite frankly, just watching Vladdy, he looks like a much better hitter, specifically regarding his swing decision. You saw this. This was before yesterday's game, even though yesterday he had 2 hits. But it was look at Vlad's swing locations today. This is based on opening day. Talk about having your eye in the zone and not deviating from it. Peter, he is not. He took his walks yesterday. He is not deviating from the strike zone at all, and he is pouncing on the pitches that he's hitting. Obviously, in the first game, he went 1 for 5. That could have easily been 2 for 5 or 3 for 5. He was been crushing the ball. Yesterday, he got rewarded with a couple hits, a walk. Like, he looks very, very good. I mentioned it in yesterday's video. It looks like he's in shape. He looks like he's locked in and ready to have a breakout year compared to what he's been having the past couple years. But he looks like a bit of a different hitter, and he looks like he's fully ready to go. And John Schneider spoke out on him and said his mechanics are really tight right now, and your mechanics are right. You make better decisions, and I can't say enough about it. This is the best sign out of the first 2 games for me, at least, regarding the Jays.
He's locked in. He's locked in right now, and he's taking whatever the pitcher is giving to him. You know, he's not trying to do too much with those borderline pitches, and I think that's where Vladdy has been getting in trouble in the past 2 years. He's trying to be the hero. He's trying to do too much instead of just passing the baton and taking what's given to him. Pitchers are human. They make mistakes. And Aaron Savali made a couple of mistakes yesterday, which Vladdy made him pay for. And in the first game,
Zach
Zach
Eflin.
Eflin made Zach Eflin made a mistake as well, which Vladdy pounced on, and you see those swing decisions that he's taking, those blues over there that we're seeing in that box. I mean, that's what Vladdy was swinging at, trying those low outside pitches.
Yeah.
He's trying to do damage on a pitcher's pitch, and you're not. It doesn't matter how talented you are. 95 on the black, you're not going to do much with it. It doesn't matter how great your bat speed is or how great your hand-eye coordination is. You can't do much with 90 to 95 on the black. So I think Vladdy knows that. He's carried over his tendencies from spring training into the first 2 games of the regular season. Now it's all about staying consistent and keeping it going until game 162 and then hopefully into the playoffs as well. We know the talent. We've been talking about it for 3 years now. He's so talented. He can do a lot of things that most major leaguers can't. They could only dream of doing what Vladdy could do. But sometimes he gets himself in trouble by trying to do too much, and he thinks he's invincible to a low outside pitch. You're not. These are still big league arms that you're facing on a nightly basis, and I think he knows that now. He was the hottest hitter in spring training of any player in baseball. I mean, he led the league in average and on base percentage, and those don't transfer over to the regular season. We wish that they did, but he's been really good in the first 2 games here, and that's a carryover effect from spring training. I think he can keep it going. That's what he did in his MVP caliber season. He was just very patient. He was not over swinging. He was not trying to do too much with pitches that you can't do damage on, and that's the recipe for success for Vladdy. His recipe for success is to take what's given to you and do damage on the pitches in which a pitcher makes a mistake on. And those swing decisions that you're showing right there, That's what he's doing right there. All those are center cut or middle away, and he's doing damage on them.
Yeah, and the question now will be if he can sustain this throughout the whole year, if he will end up deviating back to what got him in trouble the past couple of years. And the only way we're going to find out is by watching more baseball, and they do play today, so hopefully he can maintain that. But that'll wrap up the video. Let us know what your thoughts are on all this, and hit the subscribe button if you want the continued Jays content. If you want to check out a video from yesterday, click on your screen now. We'll see you tomorrow.